"Sign it now or I'll destroy you in court," my husband Derek said, sliding the divorce papers across the conference table with the casual confidence of a man who'd already won. "You have nothing. No job. No money. No proof of anything you've claimed. No chance whatsoever." His lawyer, a polished man in a $3,000 suit, nodded with barely concealed satisfaction beside him, the two of them forming a wall of male certainty across the table. But why did I remain calm despite the threats, and why, when Derek laughed at my mention of waiting for my attorney, did the conference room door suddenly open? "She's not coming," Derek had said, smirking. "I made sure of it. Your little legal aid lawyer got a call this morning, conflict of interest. You're alone now, Vivian. Sign the papers and maybe I'll let you see the kids on weekends." Then the door opened. The woman who walked in wasn't my legal aid attorney. She was someone else entirely, tall, impeccably dressed, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Derek's car payment. "I'm sorry for my delay. Traffic from the federal courthouse was terrible." She extended her hand to Derek's lawyer first, a power move that immediately shifted the room's energy. "Patricia Holloway. I'll be representing Mrs. Patterson in this matter. I trust you haven't started without proper counsel present." Derek's confident expression flickered. His lawyer's smirk disappeared entirely. "Holloway?" the lawyer repeated, recognition dawning. "Patricia Holloway from Morrison and Associates." "The same. Shall we begin properly now?" Derek hadn't always been a monster. Or maybe he had, and I'd just been too young and too desperate to escape my own troubled home to recognize the warning signs. We'd married when I was 22, fresh out of college, grateful to be chosen by someone who seemed stable and successful. For the first few years, it had been good, or good enough. Derek built his commercial real estate business while I supported him, managed our home, and eventually stayed home with our two children, Marcus and Sophia. The control had crept in gradually. "I'll handle the finances, you don't need to worry about it." "Why do you need your own credit card?" "Everything's on my accounts." "Your friends are a bad influence. Maybe you should spend more time at home." "You don't need to work. I provide everything. What more could you possibly want?" By year 8, I had no income, no credit history in my own name, no close friends who hadn't been slowly pushed away, and no easy escape from a marriage that had become a velvet prison. By year 12, the verbal abuse had become constant, the isolation complete, and the threats about custody had begun. "No judge will give kids to an unemployed woman with no resources," Derek would remind me regularly. "You'd be homeless without me. Remember that." The decision to leave had taken 2 years to execute. Not because I was weak, but because I was strategic. Derek controlled everything: money, social connections, information. Leaving without preparation would have meant losing my children to a man who would weaponize them against me without hesitation. So I'd prepared in secret. I documented every instance of verbal abuse, recording conversations in our one-party consent state. I'd photographed financial documents I wasn't supposed to see, discovering accounts and assets Derek had hidden from me. I'd built a small emergency fund through careful skimming of grocery money and selling items Derek wouldn't notice missing. And I'd reached out to Patricia Holloway, not through legal aid, but through a domestic violence nonprofit that connected survivors with pro bono representation from top attorneys. Patricia had taken my case for free, recognizing something in my situation that sparked her advocacy instincts. "He thinks he's invincible," she'd said during our first meeting. "Men like your husband always do. That's their weakness. They don't prepare for opponents who are actually prepared." Derek's ambush today had been anticipated. He'd somehow convinced my decoy attorney, the legal aid lawyer I'd contacted publicly to mislead him, to drop my case. He'd chosen this conference room, these terms, this moment of supposed vulnerability. He thought I was alone. He thought I was desperate. He thought he'd won before the fight began. Patricia's entrance changed everything. "Before we proceed," she said, settling into the chair beside me and opening her briefcase, "I need to address some irregularities in how this meeting was arranged." My client was led to believe she would have representation present. Instead, she was pressured to sign documents without counsel. "There was no pressure," Derek's lawyer, a man named Harrison, interjected quickly. "We were simply having a conversation. A conversation in which my client was told to sign or be destroyed." "That's not a conversation, Mr. Harrison. That's coercion." Patricia pulled out a small device. "I should mention that my client has been recording since she entered the room. Your threats are documented." Derek's face went red. "That's illegal. This is a one-party consent state. My client's presence constitutes the required consent." Patricia smiled thinly. "Perhaps we should review what's actually on the table, now that we're all here with proper information. The documents Derek wanted me to sign were designed to destroy me. Full custody to him. Minimal visitation for me, 4 days per month, supervised. No spousal support despite 12 years as a stay-at-home mother. A property settlement that gave me essentially nothing from a marriage that had accumulated considerable wealth. These terms are unconscionable, Patricia said, flipping through the pages. 12 years of marriage, 2 children, significant marital assets, and you're offering my client supervised visitation and no support? On what possible grounds? She's mentally unstable, Derek said, the lie rolling easily off his tongue. She's made accusations against me that are completely false. She's not fit to care for children unsupervised. Interesting. Do you have documentation of this alleged instability? Medical records? Psychiatric evaluations? Police reports from these supposed incidents? Harrison shifted uncomfortably. We're prepared to present evidence at trial. You're prepared to make allegations without evidence. There's a difference. Patricia pulled a thick folder from her briefcase. I, on the other hand, have documentation. 3 years of recorded conversations showing verbal and emotional abuse. Financial records showing hidden accounts and assets not disclosed in your client's preliminary filings. Testimony from former employees of Mr. Patterson's company regarding his behavior and temperament. Derek stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. She's making things up. Sit down, Mr. Patterson. Patricia's voice was ice. Or I'll request a continuance and file an emergency motion regarding your behavior in this meeting. I have your threats recorded. I have witnesses to your attempt to coerce my client into signing documents without counsel. How do you think that will play with Judge Morrison, who I happen to know takes a dim view of litigation bullying? The next 3 hours dismantled Derek's entire strategy. Patricia methodically presented evidence he didn't know existed. The hidden bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, $2.3 million Derek had moved offshore without my knowledge. The investment properties held in LLC structures designed to exclude marital assets. The affair with his business partner that had been ongoing for 4 years, documented through hotel receipts, flight records, and witness testimony. My client isn't the one who's been hiding things, Patricia concluded. Your client has committed financial fraud against the marriage, conducted an ongoing affair, and created an elaborate fiction about my client's mental stability to cover his own misconduct. Harrison looked at Derek with barely concealed fury. Clearly, Derek hadn't been fully honest with his own attorney about the situation. We should take a break, Harrison said. Discuss this with my client privately. Take all the time you need. But I should mention that if we don't reach a reasonable settlement today, I'll be filing motions tomorrow that include requests for forensic accounting, emergency asset freezes, and temporary custody orders based on the documented pattern of coercion and abuse. Patricia gathered her papers. My client has been patient and strategic. Your client has been arrogant and sloppy. That's an unfortunate combination for him. The break lasted 45 minutes. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Derek and Harrison arguing. Derek's face was red, his gestures aggressive. Harrison kept shaking his head, clearly delivering news his client didn't want to hear. They're recalculating, Patricia said quietly. He came in expecting to steamroll you. Now he's realizing you have more ammunition than he does. Will it be enough? More than enough. The hidden assets alone constitute fraud on the court. If he defiled his financial disclosure without revealing those accounts, that's perjury. The abuse documentation supports both custody arguments and enhanced spousal support. And the affair undermines any character attacks he planned to make against you. He'll fight. He always fights. Let him. Fighting costs money, and once those offshore accounts are frozen, his resources will be considerably more limited than he expects. Patricia paused. How are you holding up? Better than I expected. I spent 2 years preparing for this. Watching it actually work feels surreal. That preparation is why you're going to win. Most people in your situation don't have the foresight or the discipline to build a case before they leave. You did. That makes all the difference. When Derek and Harrison returned, the arrogance was gone. My client is prepared to discuss revised terms, Harrison said stiffly. In the interest of avoiding prolonged litigation and protecting the children from courtroom trauma. That's very considerate of him, given that he was threatening to destroy my client 45 minutes ago. Patricia's tone was dry. What terms are you proposing? The revised offer was dramatically different. Joint custody with primary physical placement to me. Substantial spousal support for 5 years, enough to complete my education and establish financial independence. An equitable division of marital assets, including the previously hidden accounts. It wasn't everything I deserved. But it was close. We're also requesting a confidentiality agreement, Harrison added. The details of the settlement remain private. No public discussion of the matters raised today. He wants to hide the affair and the hidden money, Patricia translated. That's negotiable, but it comes at a price. Enhanced child support. College funds fully funded now, not subject to future negotiation. And a morality clause in the custody agreement: if he exposes the children to romantic partners overnight, my client can petition for custody modification. Derek's jaw tightened, but he nodded. We'll draft revised terms and reconvene tomorrow, Patricia said. I trust there will be no further attempts to pressure my client without counsel present. The silence was answer enough. The final settlement was signed 3 weeks later. I received primary custody of Marcus and Sophia. Derek got every other weekend and half of school breaks, generous visitation for a father who threatened to take them away entirely. Spousal support totaled $180,000 over 5 years. Child support was substantial and ironclad. The property division included the hidden assets, which meant I walked away with approximately $1.2 million, money I hadn't known existed until I started documenting Derek's deceptions. The confidentiality agreement protected Derek's reputation. But it also protected mine, from any future attacks he might have launched. You won, Patricia said as we left the final signing. Completely and comprehensively. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving. Sometimes those are the same thing. You got out. You kept your children. You have resources to build a new life. That's more than most people in your situation achieve. Because of you. I couldn't have done this without representation that actually matched his. You did the work. The documentation, the planning, the patience to wait until you were ready instead of leaving in a crisis. I just presented what you'd already gathered. Patricia smiled. You were your own best advocate. I was just the voice. Derek's reaction to losing was predictable and petty. He challenged the settlement twice, both attempts rejected by judges who noted the thoroughness of the original documentation. He was late with support payments until the court garnished his wages. He badmouthed me to anyone who would listen, painting himself as the victim of a scheming ex-wife. But the narrative didn't stick. The people who knew us, the ones who watched our marriage from the outside, had seen enough warning signs to believe my version of events. The people who didn't know us didn't matter. The children adjusted, slowly. Marcus, at 12, understood more than I'd wished he had to. Sophia, at 8, was more resilient than I'd expected. Both of them eventually stopped waiting for their father to become someone he wasn't. Dad says you tricked him, Marcus mentioned once, years later. What do you think? I think you were smarter than he expected. I think he underestimated you because he always underestimated everyone. And I think you protected us from things we don't even know about. You're very perceptive. I learned it from watching you. Watching what you survived. What you built afterward. He paused. I'm proud of you, Mom. The life I built after Derek was entirely my own. I went back to school, completing the degree I'd abandoned when we married. I found work in nonprofit administration, eventually directing programs that helped domestic violence survivors, women who'd been where I was, who needed the resources and representation I'd been fortunate enough to access. Patricia became a friend as well as my former attorney. She referred cases to my organization, spoke at our events, and continued advocating for women who couldn't afford adequate representation in custody battles. The system is stacked against mothers who've been economically controlled, she told audiences regularly. They're punished for not having income by husbands who prevented them from working. They're called unstable by men who destabilized their lives deliberately. They're denied resources by courts that should protect them. That's why organizations like Vivian's matter. That's why documentation matters. That's why preparation matters. Derek remarried twice after our divorce. Both marriages ended similarly: allegations of control, hidden finances, emotional manipulation. The pattern he'd established with me continued with others, because patterns don't change when there's no consequence for maintaining them. But he never got full custody of our children. He never achieved the destruction he'd threatened. He never escaped the documentation that had exposed his schemes. Sign it or I'll make sure you never see the kids again. He'd said those words with such certainty, such absolute confidence that he held all the power and I held none. He'd been wrong. The conference room moment still visits me sometimes. The sliding of papers across the table. The smirk on his lawyer's face. The certainty in Derek's voice that he'd already won. She's not coming. I made sure of it. He'd been so certain. So confident. So convinced that manipulating my supposed legal aid attorney meant I had no defense. Then the door opened, and Patricia walked in, and everything changed. The look on his face, that moment of recognition that he'd miscalculated, that his target wasn't as vulnerable as he'd assumed. That his carefully constructed ambush had been anticipated and countered, was worth every moment of the 2 years I'd spent preparing. I speak to groups of women now, sharing what I learned. Document everything. Record when it's legal. Photograph financial statements. Build resources in secret if you have to. Find advocates who understand what you're facing. And never, ever let them convince you that you have nothing, no chance, no way out. They want you to believe you're powerless. That's how they maintain control. The moment you realize you have options, that you can prepare, can plan, can build a case before you leave, their power starts to crumble. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But it's possible. I'm proof of that. The settlement I signed was worth approximately $1.4 million when you include the property, support, and hidden assets. But the real value wasn't financial. It was watching my children grow up in a home without constant tension. It was building a career that helped other survivors. It was sleeping peacefully, finally, after years of vigilant anxiety. It was proving that strategic patience could defeat aggressive arrogance. Sign it now or I'll destroy you in court. He'd had no idea who he was threatening. No concept of what I'd been building while he'd been controlling. No understanding that the woman he'd dismissed as powerless had been preparing, documenting, and waiting for exactly this moment. The door opened. Patricia walked in. And everything changed. He slid the papers across the table with the confidence of a man who'd already won. Sign it or I'll destroy you in court. You have nothing. No job. No proof. No chance. His lawyer smiled beside him. Mine hadn't arrived yet, or so he thought. She's not coming. I made sure of it. Then the door opened, and Patricia Holloway walked in, $800 per hour representation he didn't know I had, prepared with documentation he didn't know existed, ready to expose schemes he thought were perfectly hidden. He'd spent years controlling me. I'd spent 2 years preparing for this moment. He expected a victim. He got an opponent. And everything he'd threatened to take was everything he lost. Sign it or he'd destroy me. He couldn't even destroy the case I'd built against him.